Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to have a look at security groups for EC2. Let's say you have an instance and some people might like to access this instance. You might want to access it from your computer, the public to see your beautiful website, some hackers to break your beautiful website, some other EC2 instances because that's the way you've architected the setup. They need to work together to make everything function. And your EC2 instance might want to access the internet itself. So what controls who and what can access your EC2 instance and how? Well, that control is maintained by something called a security group. The best way to think of it is as a firewall. It looks at IP addresses and ports, and it allows or blocks certain traffic from certain IP addresses and certain ports. Some things to note are that security groups by default block all incoming traffic, and that security groups are attached per resource. Very important that the security group is not attached to the whole availability zone or to the whole region or to your whole account. It's attached just to this instance. You can attach multiple security groups if you like. You can attach just one, but it is attached to a specific instance. So let's have a look. You might like to open up a port SSH, port 22 for yourself, for your IP address. So you specify your IP address and you say port SSH, and that will allow you to access this instance. Any other IP address by default will be blocked. And this is important to distinguish. You're not explicitly blocking any other IP address. You cannot do that. Security groups don't allow you to do explicit denies. They only allow you to do explicit allows, which is what you're doing here, and anything else by default is blocked. So that's also important to understand. And that will take care of SSH. Now for the public, you might want to open up port HTTPS, which is 443, so they can see your beautiful website and interact with it. For these other instances, for example, let's say you know the IP address of this one, you might want to open up port the TCP protocol, which has a range of ports, and you specifically set up port 5565 in this instance. And for the second EC2 instance over here, we're going to do a slightly different approach. It has its own security group B, and what you can do is you can allow TCP, let's say, or any other port, but let's say you want to open up TCP 6438 for this instance. But rather than specifying the IP address like we did here, you can specify this whole security group. And basically anything with this security group attached to it inside your account will be able to access your EC2 instance through port TCP 6438. And this is a very convenient way because if something happens to the instance and its IP address changes, this is not affected. This setup will not work if the IP address changes here, but if the IP address, if this instance changes, this setup will continue working. So this is also important to know. It's a bit more advanced, but a good thing to know that is possible. And finally, for outbound access, all outbound access is allowed by default through any port, which kind of makes sense. Why not? If you want to change that, you will have to remove this rule because this is an explicit allow rule. You remove it, then it will be by default all will all be denied, and then you explicitly allow the specific accesses that you may need. So there we go. That's how security groups work. Here's a quick summary. The important parts are highlighted in bold. Remember that security groups are attached per resource. They look at traffic, and you cannot do explicit denies in security groups. And one final thing, here are some ports. These are the key ports that are important to remember for the exam. I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, enjoy the cloud.